The airport was always the same, a noisy, bright maze of people rushing and tired voices over the loudspeaker. Elena pushed through the crowd, her small suitcase bumping against her legs. She was beyond tired. Her week had been a monster of late nights, last-minute changes from her bosses, and coffee that had stopped working hours ago. All for a presentation that got a simple "we'll think about it" in return. Her premium economy ticket felt like a prize she'd already paid for with her sanity. She found her seat, squeezed between a window and a man already deep into a movie on his tablet. It was fine. It was what she could afford. But as she stuffed her bag under the seat in front of her, her eyes drifted forward, past the curtain that divided the cabin. Through the gap, she could see the wide gray leather of the first-class seats. They looked like thrones. One seat in particular, 2A, was empty and clean, a soft pillow waiting for a head. A flight attendant walked by, his uniform crisp. "Welcome aboard," he said with a professional smile that didn't touch his eyes. He moved up through the curtain without a second glance. The man across the aisle in first class, in seat 2B, caught her stare for a second. He was a black man in a simple, well-fitted sweater, maybe in his 40s. He wasn't flashy. He was reading a printed report, his glasses low on his nose. He looked calm, like the noise of the airport couldn't touch him. He noticed her looking, gave a slight, polite nod, and went back to his papers. Not unfriendly, just occupied. She quickly looked away. A little heat in her cheeks dot as the plane took off. Alana's plans started to form in her tired mind. It was a long flight to the West Coast. 6 hours in this cramped seat felt like a prison sentence. But that seat, 2A, it was just sitting there. No bag on it, no jacket. Maybe someone had missed the flight. She had done this before, once on a shorter trip. She had moved to an empty better seat after takeoff, and no one had said a word. The trick was to act like you belonged. Confidence was everything. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The cabin came alive with the sound of people standing up, opening bags, heading to the bathrooms. This was her moment. Her heart did a little tap dance against her ribs. This was the risky part. She took a deep breath, put on what she hoped was a relaxed, "this is normal" face, and stood up. She smoothly pulled her laptop bag from under the seat, picked up her neck pillow, and stepped into the aisle. She didn't look at the man in 2B. She just slid past the curtain, walked the 3 steps to seat 2A, and sat down. The feeling was instant. The leather sighed underneath her, soft and cool. The space was incredible. She could stretch her legs all the way out and not touch a thing. A wave of pure relief washed over her. She had done it. The flight attendant from before, Gavin according to his name tag, approached asterisk. The first half hour in the big seat felt like a dream. The champagne was cold, the cabin around her was quiet, and the gentle hum of the plane was a lullaby. Elena let herself relax, scrolling through movies she'd never have time to watch normally. She was winning. She had outsmarted the system, but slowly, little cracks began to appear in her perfect victory. It started with the flight attendant, Gavin. Every time he came by to offer a warm towel, to ask about the meal, he was perfectly polite to her. Yet, his attention always seemed to settle a beat longer on the man beside her. It wasn't an obvious stare, but a slight shift in his posture, a readiness in his expression, as if waiting for a signal. Once, when she asked for another drink, Gavin nodded, but his eyes immediately flicked to her neighbor, as if checking for some unspoken permission. The man simply gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head, and Gavin said, "I'll bring that right after the meal service, ma'am." It was smooth, but it felt controlled. Then there was the man himself. He was the strangest part. Elena had braced herself for annoyance, for a sigh, maybe even a quiet word to the attendant. She was prepared to play dumb, to act like there was a mix-up with her ticket. But the man gave her nothing. No frustration, no curiosity, not even mild interest. He was an island of calm. He read his reports, typed on his tablet with quiet clicks, and once took a brief phone call, turning his head towards the window. His side of the conversation was what really snagged her attention. His voice stayed low, but the words carried a quiet weight. Push the timeline up. I don't care about their quarterly forecasts. If they can't align with our vision, we walk away. Yes, the final number is firm. It's not a discussion. He wasn't asking. He was stating facts. This wasn't the language of a mid-level manager. This was the language of someone who is used to things happening because he said so. A small knot of doubt tightened in Elena's stomach. Who was this person who could talk about walking away from what sounded like a huge deal without raising his voice? She tried to sneak a better look. His watch was simple, just a sleek silver band, not the chunky, flashy kind some businessmen wore. His shoes were clean but looked worn in, comfortable. Nothing about him screamed money. It whispered at Dot to distract herself. She focused on the luxury. She pressed the button to lay the seat all the way back. It whirred smoothly. But as she did, she caught Gavin again, standing near the galley, watching. Not with a frown, but with a kind of professional curiosity, like a scientist observing an experiment. It made her skin prickle. She quickly brought the seat back upright. The meal service came. For first class, it wasn't just a tray. It was a production. A white linen cloth was laid on her table, and Gavin presented her choices like a fine restaurant server. She chose the seared fish. When he served the man beside her, it was different. He didn't recite the options. He simply said, "Your usual is ready, sir. I have the sauce on the side, as you prefer." "Thank you, Gavin," the man said, without looking up from his tablet. His usual. The words echoed in Elena's head. How often did someone fly to have a usual in first class? As they ate in silence, the space between them felt less like an empty aisle and more like a deep canyon. Her earlier feeling of being clever started to feel childish. This wasn't a game she had won. It was a game she didn't even understand the rules to. She was a kid who had climbed into the driver's seat of a parked car, pretending to drive while the real owner sat on the porch. Watching with calm eyes, she found herself listening to the small sounds he made, the turn of a page, the soft tap on his tablet, the quiet sip of his sparkling water. Each one felt amplified. The enormous comfort of the seat began to feel sticky, like she was sinking into something she couldn't get out of. Halfway through the meal, he finally spoke to her directly. He looked over, his expression neutral. "The fish. Is it good?" The question was so ordinary, it threw her completely. "Oh, yes, it's very good," she stammered, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet cabin. He gave that same slight nod from the beginning of the flight and returned to his meal. That was it. No small talk. No, so work or vacation. Just a simple question about the fish, asked with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. And that was the most unsettling thing of all. His complete, total lack of concern about her being there. A normal person would be curious or annoyed, or at least make awkward conversation. His calm wasn't polite. It was powerful. It meant her presence in this seat was so insignificant to his world that it wasn't even worth a reaction. The knot in her stomach grew heavier. The champagne taste in her mouth was gone, replaced by a metallic tongue of anxiety. Her smile had vanished completely now, replaced by a quiet, watchful tension. She was waiting for something, though she had no idea what. The quiet in the cabin was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet before a storm. The meal was cleared away with a quiet efficiency that felt almost too smooth. Elena's plate was gone, her table wiped clean. Gavin worked like a shadow, present but silent. The man beside her had finished his usual and was back to his tablet, his glasses reflecting the soft screen light. Elena tried to lose herself in a movie. She picked a big, colorful superhero film, something loud and simple. But she couldn't follow the story. Her mind was a trapped bird, fluttering against the cage of her own making. She kept replaying the man's phone call in her head. Asterisk, we walk away. Who says that so calmly? She was so wrapped up in her thoughts that she jumped a little when Gavin appeared beside their row again. He wasn't looking at her. His whole body was angled toward the man in 2B, a posture of pure attention. "Sir," Gavin said, his voice a respectful notch lower than before. "The preliminary reports from the Singapore meeting have been uploaded to the secure server. Would you like me to prepare the documents for you now? Or shall I set up the cabin for your rest period?" The man, sir, didn't look up immediately. He finished typing a thought, then removed his glasses. "The reports now, please, Gavin. Thank you." His voice was the same steady, low tone. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And please check with the flight deck on our progress. I'd like to review the landing protocols for my new aircraft. I want to understand the handling notes from the captain." The words landed in the quiet cabin with the weight of stones. "My new aircraft." Elena's breath hitched in her throat. The superheroes on her screen were punching each other silently. She couldn't move. Gavin simply nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll fetch the printed reports and speak with the captain immediately. Everything has been running perfectly on your plane." He said it so naturally, like someone might say, "Your car or your coffee order." Your plane. The two words echoed, loud and terrible, in the hollow space inside Elena's head. A cold wave washed over her, starting at the top of her scalp and rushing down to her toes, which suddenly felt frozen in the spacious footwell. The soft leather of the seat, which had felt like a cloud before, now felt like quicksand, pulling her down into a deep, embarrassing pit, slowly as if moving through thick syrup. She turned her head. The man, the owner of the plane, was looking right at her. He had turned in his seat, his body relaxed against the gray leather, one arm resting on the divider between them. His expression was impossible to read. It wasn't angry. It wasn't smirking. It was patient. The patience of a mountain. He had known. He had known this entire time. Her mouth was dry. The practiced, brilliant smile she used in boardrooms and client meetings was gone, erased completely. Her face felt stiff and cold. She tried to form a word, an apology, anything, but only a faint, dry sound came out. He watched her struggle for a second. The hum of the plane was the only sound. Then he spoke. His voice was still quiet, but in the silence it was clear as glass. "It's a comfortable seat, isn't it?" The question was so simple, so devastating. It wasn't about the seat. It was about every assumption she had made, every bit of smug satisfaction she had felt. She managed a tiny, shaky nod, her eyes wide. He held her gaze for one more moment, letting the reality sink in, layer by awful layer. Then he delivered the final gentle blow. He didn't say it to show off. He said it the way you might state the time or the weather. A simple, undeniable fact. "I own this plane." The world seemed to narrow to a tiny, burning point of shame in the center of her chest. The spacious first-class cabin now felt like a spotlight was shining directly on her, hot and blinding. Gavin returned then, holding a small, thick folder. He handed it to the man, giving no indication he had just witnessed a life-altering embarrassment. Business as usual. On his plane, Elena wanted to disappear. She wanted the seat to swallow her whole. She thought of her cramped seat back in premium economy, and it suddenly seemed like the safest, most wonderful place in the world. a place where she belonged. Her hands, which had been resting comfortably on the armrests, now felt like they were stealing something. Every single part of her, from the champagne she drunk to the blanket across her lap, felt like stolen property. The man who owned the plane took the folder from Gavin, gave a final, unreadable glance at the frozen young woman in seat 2A, and opened the report. He put his glasses back on Dot, and just like that, the moment passed. The spotlight shut off. He was back to work, absorbed in the papers in front of him. The universe, which had seemed to stop and stare, began to turn again. But for Elena, everything had changed. The quiet was no longer peaceful or unsettling. It was deafening. It was the sound of her own foolishness echoing back at her. She sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead at the seat back in front of her, seeing nothing. The only thought in her mind, playing on a frantic, horrible loop, was asterisk. Time stopped and stretched in the strangest way. Elena sat frozen, her mind a white-hot blank. The words, "I own this plane," just kept repeating, bouncing around the hollow space inside her head. This wasn't a rich person. This was a different kind of person altogether. The kind who didn't just buy a ticket, but bought the entire machine. Her first, desperate instinct was to run, to scramble out of the seat, grab her things, and stumble back to her assigned spot, as if she could undo the last hour by physically leaving it behind. Her body tensed, ready to bolt. She shifted, the leather making a soft sound that was terribly loud in the quiet. She started to reach for her laptop bag at her feet. Stay. The word was quiet, but it had the force of a command. He hadn't even looked up from his report. Her hand froze over the bag. She slowly sat back, her spine rigid. Was he going to have her arrested? Was security waiting in Los Angeles? Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. He finished reading a paragraph, placed a small, neat mark on the paper with his pen, and then set the folder down. He took off his glasses and turned to face her fully. His expression was still calm, but it was focused now. The neutral patience was gone, replaced by a sharp, assessing look. It felt like being scanned by a very gentle, very precise laser. "You move seats with a lot of confidence," he began. His tone was conversational, but it wasn't friendly. It was analytical. Why? The question threw her. She expected anger, a lecture, not an interview. I was tired," she stammered, her voice thin. "My week was long. The seat was empty. I just thought—" "You thought you could take it," he finished for her. He nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed a hypothesis. "Audacity. It's a useful tool. In business, sometimes it's the only thing that opens a door." He paused, letting that hang in the air. "But it's a dangerous tool if you don't do your homework first." He leaned forward just a little. "Did you do any homework before you took this seat?" She could only shake her head, mute with shame. "Did you notice who was already in the cabin? Did you observe the dynamic with the flight crew? Did you consider that an empty seat in first class on a full flight might be empty for a reason?" Each question was soft, but it landed like a tap from a hammer, driving the point deeper. "You saw an opportunity, and you took it. That's hustle. I can respect hustle. But you didn't look at the context. You assumed the context didn't apply to you." He settled back. "I made a similar mistake once. Early on. I saw a company I wanted to buy. I saw the numbers. I saw the potential. I moved with audacity. I made an offer, a bold one." A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips, not from humor, but from memory. "I didn't do all my homework. I didn't understand the family who owned it, their history, what the business really meant to them. My audacity offended them. They sold to someone else for less money, just to make a point to me. A point one deserved." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something like understanding in his eyes. Not sympathy, but recognition. A $20 million lesson in context. In respect. This seat, he said, gesturing to the space around her, is your lesson. Much cheaper. The fear was beginning to melt, replaced by a dizzying, intense concentration. This wasn't a scolding. This was coaching. From a man who could buy and sell her entire world before dessert was served. What do you do? He asked, his tone shifting again. I'm in marketing. Junior executive, she said, finding her voice a little. Tell me about a campaign you're proud of. 1 minute. She stumbled through an explanation of a recent project, her mind racing. He listened, then dissected it with 3 sharp questions about target demographics and cost per acquisition that revealed the weak spots she'd tried to gloss over. You're good at selling the idea, he said. To yourself first. That's why you're sitting here. You sold yourself on the idea that you deserved this seat, that there would be no consequences. You're creative. You're bold. But without the foundation of real work, of real understanding, it's just a story. And eventually, the real world calls the story's bluff. He glanced at his watch, a simple, elegant motion. We'll be starting our descent soon. The spell was breaking. The strange, terrifying, incredible conversation was ending. The real world, with its consequences, was coming back. Go back to your seat now, he said. His voice was final, but not unkind. The lesson is learned. The view from where you belong will be clearer from now on. It was a dismissal, but it felt like a gift. He was giving her an escape, a way to end the scene with a shred of dignity. She nodded, her movements clumsy. She gathered her things, her hands trembling slightly. As she stood, he was already looking back at his report, the conversation already filed away in his mind. Another piece of business concluded. She stepped back through the curtain. The premium economy cabin seemed different, not just smaller, but real. The man watching the movie, the baby fussing a few rows up, the flight attendant handing out water bottles. This was her context. This was where her ticket, her actual work, had placed her. She slid into her narrow seat by the window. A person next to her gave a slight, annoyed sigh as she sat down. It was normal. It was real. She looked out at the wing of the plane, stretching out over the clouds. He owned it. Every bolt, every wire, every seat. And for a few minutes, he had forced her to see the world and herself with a painful, brilliant clarity. The embarrassment was still there, a hot coal in her stomach. But underneath it, something else was sparking. A new kind of attention. A hunger to not just take a seat, but to truly earn one. The final descent into Los Angeles felt like the longest part of the journey. Elena stared out the window, watching the brown mountains and sprawling city grids grow larger, but she wasn't really seeing them. Her mind was a whirlwind, replaying every word, every quiet look from the man up front. The hot shame was still there, but it had cooled into something harder and more solid, a resolution. The plane touched down with a gentle bump and a roar of reverse thrust. The familiar ritual of arrival began. The ding of the seatbelt sign, the scramble for bags, the impatient queue in the aisle. Everything was normal, but she felt completely different. She moved slowly, letting the crowd push ahead. She needed a moment to think. By the time she made it to the front of the plane, the first-class cabin was empty. The man was gone. The seats, including the now infamous 2A, looked just like luxurious chairs again, stripped of their meaning. Gavin was standing by the door, his professional smile fixed in place. "Thank you. Have a pleasant day," he said to each person as she passed him. He did something unexpected. He made brief, direct eye contact and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the look one professional gives to another after a tough but important meeting. It said, asterisk, you survived. You listened, dot asterisk. She nodded back, her throat tight, and stepped off the plane. The jet bridge was crowded and noisy. She was carried along by the flow of people, her small suitcase trailing behind her. Her mind was already racing ahead. Do your homework? The words were a drumbeat in her head. She wouldn't just go home and hide from the embarrassment. She would use it. Then she saw him. He was about 30 feet ahead, walking not towards the main terminal chaos, but through a discreet side door marked Private Arrivals, Crew. He was alone. Just his leather bag slung over one shoulder. He moved with an easy, unhurried pace that cut through the airport noise. He was about to disappear. Her feet moved before her brain could overthink it. She wasn't running, but she walked quickly, her suitcase wheels whirring on the polished floor. Excuse me, sir? He stopped at the door and turned. He didn't look surprised. He waited, his expression calm, holding the door open slightly with his foot. Up close again, she felt the full force of his presence. This wasn't the quiet man from Seat 2B. This was the CEO, the owner, the person who had dissected her ambitions at 30,000 feet. All her rehearsed words vanished. I just wanted to thank you, she managed to say, her voice firmer than she expected. For the conversation. For the lesson. It was more valuable than you know. He studied her for a second, as if checking to see if she meant it. He seemed to find what he was looking for. He shifted his bag and reached into an inner pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a simple, thick white business card holder. He took out a single card. It was elegant, heavy paper. On one side, there was just a company name, Ether Ventures, and a complex website address. No personal name, no title, no phone number. It was a card that said you already knew who he was, or you had no business having it. Then he took out a pen. He flipped the card over and wrote on the blank back. His handwriting was clean and quick. He wrote a single email address, nothing more. Below it, he wrote a short line. In-flight audit, potential. He handed her the card. The lesson was free, he said. This is an invoice. She took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. She didn't understand. If the lesson stuck, he continued, his tone becoming brisk, businesslike, you'll do your homework. My firm is launching a new fund focused on sustainable aviation technology. It's complex. It needs to be explained simply to investors, to partners, to the public. He nodded at the card in her hand. Your proposal is to tell me how you would market it. Not with audacity, with understanding. Research the sector. Understand the problems we're solving. Then, one page only. Tell me your single best idea to make it matter. Send it there. He paused, letting the enormity of the task sink in. If it's based on a real foundation, if it shows you did the work, someone will read it. If it's just another story, well, you know what happens to stories. A man in a pilot's uniform appeared at the door behind him. Sir, the car is ready when you are. He gave a final nod to Elena, a look that was neither encouraging nor discouraging. It was simply a door, left slightly ajar. Good luck, he said. Then he turned and walked through the door, which shut softly behind him with a solid, expensive click. She stood there in the middle of the bustling terminal, people streaming around her like water around a stone. She looked down at the card. The email address seemed to pulse in her hand. In-flight audit, potential. He hadn't just seen a seat stealer. He'd seen something he could test. He'd turned her biggest mistake into a case study. The walk to the baggage claim felt different. The weight of her carry-on wasn't just luggage. It was the weight of a chance she had almost missed, of a lesson she couldn't unlearn. The noisy airport announcements, The crying babies, the smell of fast food, it all felt more real, more vivid. She was back in her own world, but she saw it with new eyes. She didn't feel clever anymore. Clever was what got you a free glass of champagne. This felt heavier and harder and infinitely more promising. She had spent the flight trying to grab a better seat. She had landed with the chance to build one of her own dot as she waited for her suitcase to tumble onto the carousel. She pulled out her phone. She opened a fresh note. The title was Homework. The first thing she typed was, "What is sustainable aviation technology?" The work, the real work, had already begun. The smile that touched her lips then was small, private, and had nothing to do with getting away with something. It was the quiet beginning of understanding what it might mean to earn something instead. The plane, the seat, the man, they were gone. But the clear, sharp echo of his lesson remained, a compass needle pointing her toward a new direction.